It is my honor to bring up our next presenter, and our next presenter is Dr. John Newman. Dr. John Newman is a retired U.S. Ladies and gentlemen, all right, let me give him his proper introduction. Dr. John Newman is a retired U.S. Army intelligence officer and is currently adjunct professor of political science at James Madison University. As an educator, historian, and citizen activist, Dr. Newman's focus on the eternal civil rights struggles within this nation have been decisively established and documented. In the early 1990s, he was recognized as Teacher of the Year, the Stanley J. Drazik Award at the University of Maryland, University College. His name was submitted for consideration based on his course and lectures on the radical nature of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s strategies during the civil rights movement. In the late 1990s, he was invited to a conference of the National Alliance of Black School Educators as the scholar in residence to discuss the crack cocaine epidemic in American cities. He presented documentary evidence from a CIA whistleblower about how the CIA's imported tons of cocaine on Oliver North's planes returning from Nicaragua, where they had, against Congress's orders, delivered weapons to the Contra rebel forces. He worked closely, sometimes daily, with Representative Maxine Waters, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and Elijah Cummings, the representative of Maryland's 7th Congressional District. He also engaged in almost daily with activists such as Dick Gregory and Joe Madison, including demonstrating at a main gate to the CIA, main entrance to the CIA. His phone was tapped and he was trailed by the FBI. The agents following him often signaled their support for the cause in which he was engaged. He traveled to major metropolitan cities like Detroit, Dallas, and others to meet with police departments and their counter-narcotics units. These and other actions with the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives eventually led the CIA Inspector General, IG, to investigate these allegations. A few years after his campaign subsided, the CIA released a report by the IG substantiating facts of the CIA's involvement in the importing of cocaine to America. Dr. Newman has published books on the Cold War period, documenting the key role of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., played in the 1960s election of John F. Kennedy. In the past 6 years, he has made presentations on Dr. King's life to the faculty and students of James Madison University, and will soon be publishing a book about the subjects being covered in the following address. His presentation tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is entitled Shocking New Evidence in the MLK Case. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Dr. John Newman.
My assistant who wrote that just forgot to mention our new YouTube project. All you need to remember is Ghosts of the Spy Wars, Pete Bagley's Last Call, and that's the name of our YouTube channel. And we've got a lot of stuff up there now. So I didn't want to have the word murder or death or anything like that in what I'm about to talk about tonight. So it's not there. It is shocking, the stuff I'm going to be talking about. Like this? Is that better? Closer. I mean, I got to do this? No, I'm not going to do that. Okay. All right. So the book that this is going to become later this year, before the end of the year, is the real title is the CIA people who give me trouble here and there are going to hate this title. The CIA penetration of Martin Luther King's inner circle. Okay. So we'll go ahead and start the slides. I meant to say before we start, there are two names I'm not going to reveal tonight. And one is the name of the mole working for the CIA inside of King's Circle. And the other name is his CIA case officer. So, and I'm not going to show real documents. I have 4 sets of them, and they'll be released later this year. But they're hidden in different places, so I'm going to have them when I need them. All right, so let's go back to it.
The penetration of Martin Luther King's inner circle. Introduction. A plot to discredit King before his assassination. The mole inside King's inner circle was a longtime enemy of Harry Belafonte. The mole CIA case officer worked in the Office of Security in the CIA, and he described the mole as a violent anti-communist who had been passing derogatory information on the leaders of the civil rights movement for many years. The mole had a special hatred for MLK and Harry Belafonte and their alleged pro-communist and pro-Soviet activities. He said Belafonte was a Maoist who was controlling MLK under the direction of the Chinese Communist Party. The mole claimed that the communists in Moscow and Beijing were both exploiting the Martin Luther King problem. The case officer said the mole was convinced that the Beijing-line communists were getting more influence than the Moscow communists in the world and in the US. The mole also claimed that Belafonte had taken over the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. The CIA's mole inside MLK's inner circle had a dark past of stealing money and ruthlessly exploiting his associates. The impact of the 1939 Nazi-Soviet Pact, the exodus of members from the American Communist Party. Stretching back into the 1930s, the mole was a con artist with a shady communist past and a penchant for getting his hands on other people's money. In the mid-1930s, he was the treasurer for the American Communist Party, the ACP, in Chicago. The conclusion of the 1939 Nazi-Soviet Pact by Stalin and Hitler caused an abrupt exodus of people from Western communist parties. The mole made off to Mexico with a great deal of the ACP's money. The FBI caught him and forced him to help ferret out communists. As a result, the mole concentrated on successfully penetrating the entertainment field and the burgeoning civil rights movement. His reports to the Security Office from 1950 to 1969 pertained primarily to the activities of Martin Luther King Jr. and various leaders of the civil rights movement. After the Nazi-Soviet Pact, the mole had to change his name and his appearance to hide his past support for the American Communist Party. Harry Belafonte and Stanley Levinson. During his interviews with the FBI, the mole hid the details of his business deals with his victims and how he ended up owing large sums of money to them. Those victims included lawyer Stanley Levinson and singer Harry Belafonte. The mole never mentioned the contractual secrecy promises that he extracted from Levinson and Belafonte, requiring them to keep the mole's money embezzling a secret between themselves and later from Dr. King. Levinson and King were both progressive activists who became close to Martin Luther King Jr. during the 1955 Montgomery bus boycott. Belafonte was a larger threat to the mole's plan to discredit King than Levinson was. The reason for that was because Belafonte's fame was increasing fast. This made his ability to help fund King's rise to dominance in the burgeoning civil rights movement. The clash between the mole and Belafonte did not get underway until the mid-1950s. The mole's battle with Levinson had begun in the 1940s. Eventually, Harry Belafonte found it necessary to have the mole investigated. Levinson and Belafonte's relations with the mole were complicated by divorces and marriages. In 1939, Stanley Levinson and Janet Alterman had married, only to divorce in 1941. Shortly afterwards, the mole, already divorced, married Levinson's former wife, Janet, while Levinson married again to one Beatrice Merkin. It was a year after the end of the bus boycott, during 1958, when the mole became a confidential informant for the CIA. His reports to the Security Office up to 1969 pertained primarily to the activities of Martin Luther King Jr. and various leaders of the civil rights movement. Due to his long suffering at the hands of the mole, Belafonte conducted his own investigation. The information from that investigation was preserved in Harry Belafonte's 2011 book, My Song. I will discuss that investigation shortly. The mole had nothing but raw, red hatred for Martin Luther King. In 1965, just weeks after the U.S. Marines had landed at Da Nang in South Vietnam, the mole inside MLK's inner circle met his case officer in the Office of Security. The mole said he feared a violent disruption would result from a communist penetration of the civil rights movement. The mole said that MLK had to be removed from the leadership of the movement before he was assassinated. The mole was gravely concerned that if MLK was discredited by white sources instead of from within the movement, i.e. black leaders, it would cause very dangerous problems for the U.S. government. The mole claimed that MLK and Harry Belafonte had begun integrating the civil rights movement with their attacks on U.S. policy in Vietnam. MLK's alleged merging of the war in Vietnam and communism. In the summer of 1965, the CIA mole was proclaiming that Martin Luther King Jr. and singer-entertainer Harry Belafonte were tying the Vietnam War and the civil rights movements together and blending that combination with the extreme attack on U.S. policy by the Beijing communists. The mole lamented the fact that other Americans were joining this trend and following King's lead on the Vietnam War. The mole had his eyes on a longtime leader of the civil rights movement, James Farmer, as a potential recruit in a campaign to discredit Martin Luther King. According to the mole, Farmer, who had founded the Congress for Racial Equality, CORE, in 1942, had reversed a CORE stand against the U.S. government involvement in the war in Vietnam. Farmer, the mole said, was successfully moving CORE away from the Vietnam War and concentrating instead on civil rights work. The mole said he would stay in touch with the chief of SRS or his case officer as he learned more about Farmer and CORE. The mole was correct about one thing. Martin Luther King hated what America was doing in Vietnam.
I don't mind giving my witness this morning. I'm against war in general. And I'm really against the war in Vietnam in particular. I'm against it because of its injustice. And anybody who knows the history and the development of that war realize that it is one of the most tragic evils and injustices ever perpetrated on a nation, and we are destroying that country, going down this dark and tragic road, the most hated nation in the world. There isn't a single official of our country can go anywhere in the world without being stoned and the eggs being thrown at them anywhere they go in the world. It's because we have taken on to ourselves a kind of arrogance of power. We've ignored the mandates of justice and morality. And I don't know about you, but I wish I could make a witness more positive about this thing. I wish I was of draft age. I wish I did not have my ministerial exemption. And I'll tell you this morning, I would not fight in the war in Vietnam. I'd go to jail before I do it. And I say to the federal government or anybody else, they can do to me what they did to Dr. Spock and William Sloan Coffin, my good friend, the chaplain of Yale. They just as well get ready to convict me, because I'm going to continue to say to young men, if you feel it in your heart that this war is wrong, unjust, and objectionable, don't go and fight in it. Follow the path of Jesus Christ.
That was about 6 months before he was murdered, very close to the sermon that you saw earlier that was given in New York, Beyond Vietnam. This is from a collection of very rare King sermons that I got my hands on a long time ago. And I play it to my students all the time. And it's just silence in the room. Let's go ahead to the next slide.
The battle between Belafonte and the Mole. 1956, Levison and Belafonte joined Martin Luther King's team in Montgomery. The Montgomery bus boycott, originally planned for a single day, lasted more than 380 days until it finally succeeded in integrating public transportation in the Alabama state capital. But before it was over, 3 men had joined forces that the CIA mole would become obsessed with, above all other civil rights leaders. They were Martin King Jr., Harry Belafonte, and Stanley Levison. All 3 would end up at the galactic center of the mole's derogatory informant reports to the CIA. It was during the middle of the bus boycott that Levison, who was already engaged in the civil rights struggle, was first introduced to King. The prominent civil rights leader, Bayard Rustin, the first outside advisor to volunteer assistance to King's bus boycott, introduced Levison to King. Eager to help Dr. King, Levison soon became his most trusted aide. The dislike between the mole and Belafonte deepened as Martin Luther King displaced the mole as Belafonte's mentor and foster father. King reached out to Harry Belafonte. The new friendship between King and Belafonte would become a cornerstone in the emergent civil rights movement. It was Dr. King who first reached out to Belafonte, as Belafonte recalled. One day in the spring of 1956, I picked up the phone to hear a courtly Southern voice. "You don't know me, Mr. Belafonte, but my name is Martin Luther King Jr." I took a beat. "Oh, I know you," I said. "Everybody knows you." King needed to keep the boycotters' spirits up, and he needed money. For that, he was coming up to New York on a fundraising swing. "Would I meet him?" he asked. At the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, after he spoke to a gathering of fellow clergy he was hoping to recruit for his mission. By the time Belafonte met King, his second album, simply called Belafonte, was headed for the Billboard's #2 spot, where it remained for several months. When the call came from King, Belafonte's career had hit a high point. King told Belafonte that he needed help. At that time, Belafonte had reservations about leading African American ministers. Several he knew previously had abandoned W.E.B. Du Bois and Paul Robeson in their hours of need. Nevertheless, Belafonte went to the meeting with King at the church in Harlem. Belafonte recalled, "Still, I was most curious to meet this new prophet. No one else quite like him had appeared in my lifetime, with the exception of Gandhi. Would he live up to the hype?" When I met him afterward in a reception room, I was struck by a sense of calm. He stood surrounded by at least 200 well-wishers, yet he seemed unaffected by the crowd, at peace with himself, as if he were standing alone. He certainly fascinated me. Above all, I was taken by his humility. This man was both determined to do what he saw as his mission and truly overwhelmed by it. "I need your help," he told me more than once. I said I'd help him any way I could. And for the next 12 years, that's what I did. Belafonte fires his father. By the time Harry Belafonte met Stanley Levison in July 1956, Levison had been an arch enemy of the mole for 8 years, since 1948. But we don't have many details of what they revealed to each other. All we know for sure is that Levinson did not reveal the mole's real name or his communist background or the fact that Janet had been his wife in whatever conversations he had with Belafonte. This tells us that Levinson was a man who kept his word. Furthermore, Belafonte did not learn about Janet's first marriage to Levinson until shortly after the 1963 March on Washington. At the time Belafonte was introduced to Levinson, he was still undergoing psychotherapy with Janet, as Belafonte recalled it. Of course, I said nothing to her of my new misgivings about her husband as my manager, so the therapeutic process, if it had any value before, had a lot less now. What was the point of having a therapist if you couldn't share your greatest concern with her? But one day I realized I was dealing with a far larger issue. In their sessions, he saw how Janet was always probing him about his political life. And Belafonte remembers wondering, what was this all about? Belafonte agreed to give the mole power of attorney. A crazy mistake. Belafonte became disappointed with the consequences of his overeager decision to give power of attorney to the mole for all of his money that was available for investments. When Belafonte asked the mole to give him a check so that he could participate with some of his black friends in a real estate opportunity in Harlem, the mole's reaction made him question everything. As Belafonte recalled it, I asked the mole for a check and he balked. It sounds like a bad idea, he said. My timing was bad, he said. He'd invested most of my portfolio into soybean commodities, and to undo that package right now would be costly. Who were these people, the mole and his wife? And what was their real agenda with me? Had they come at me from any different angle, I would have asked myself that question long before. Belafonte could no longer avoid the possibility that the help coming from the mole and his wife had an ulterior motive. Belafonte decides to investigate the mole. Belafonte hired a tough lawyer who worked for the Longshoremen's Union. Charlie Katz was familiar with people in the political groups that the mole had participated in during the 1940s. For the remainder of the summer in 1956, Belafonte kept up his sessions with Janet to avoid arousing their, that's the mole and Janet, suspicions. As Belafonte remembered, then at last, I, Belafonte, heard back from Charlie Katz. Charlie's story was quite simply mind-boggling. The name, the mole's pseudo, he explained, was fake. I was dealing with the mole's true name, former treasurer for the American Communist Party Chicago operation. The mole had absconded with a lot of the party's money, gone south of the border, invested it, and got entangled in some financial fraud. When the FBI had caught up with him on the fraud charge and learned of his past with the Communist Party, they'd given him a choice: go to jail or become a spy for the FBI. He'd chosen the latter. Katz told Belafonte that the FBI had given the mole a complete makeover, plastic surgery, a new identity with a pseudonym, and a new past as an Irish-born laborer. Oh my gosh. The mole's mission was to spy on leftist artists and entertainers that the Bureau suspected of having communist ties. Making a deal with the devil. In late 1956, Belafonte agreed to let Katz confront the mole with the truth. In his Wall Street office, Katz greeted the mole as Mr. Mole's true name. In shock, the mole quickly dismissed his secretary from the room. Katz then came straight to the point with his demands. Belafonte recounts what happened. Katz wanted the mole to surrender his power of attorney, hand over all of my money, and sign papers promising never to bring any legal claim against me. In return, we would sign a non-disclosure agreement, which he would sign as well, stipulating that neither side would divulge any details of the situation or go after each other in any way. Just as he had with Levinson in 1949, the mole signed the agreement. Afterward, Belafonte was relieved to get all of his money back and then some. Belafonte did not know that the mole worked for the CIA. The mole was not relieved by the deal with Belafonte. It could not have been lost on him that Dr. King's sudden rise to power threatened his own agenda for using the civil rights movement. The fact that both Levinson and Belafonte were working closely with King lit the mole's fuse. Belafonte remembered how, when the mole didn't get his way, his face turned red while he shouted in a high-pitched voice. We now know that behind the scenes, the mole had to tell the FBI about the details he and Janet had pried from Belafonte's lips during those late afternoon psychotherapy sessions followed by mixed drinks. But Belafonte was unaware that about that time, the mole had begun to gather information on suspected communists for the CIA. CIA records show that by 1958, the agency took over the covert handling of the mole. In 1965, the mole's case officer revealed that the mole had been a confidential informant of the CIA, providing reports on the leaders of the civil rights movement since 1958. Moreover, and very troubling, is the fact that many of the records from the period between 1958 and early 1964, just after the assassination of President Kennedy, were destroyed or have yet to be released. Summary. The mole's case officer worked in the CIA's Office of Security in the mind control program, scrambling people's brains before killing them, mainly. The mole's wife, Janet, was a credentialed psychotherapist who, along with her husband, double-teamed the brainwashing of Belafonte. Belafonte saw through their scheme and investigated the mole. Belafonte has lived a long life and eventually told this story in his autobiography, Belafonte.
So I should add at this point that the case officer assigned to this mole was high up in the mind control program of the CIA. And that's what they're doing with him twice a week at the very last session of the day, and then alcoholic drinks afterwards. Let's go.
How the mole's control over Stanley Levinson and Harry Belafonte blew up. 22 August 1963, MLK's I Have a Dream speech. It was a day like none other. The historic 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s unforgettable performance overlooking the Mall and Capitol Monument to a crowd of more than 200,000 people. He began with a reference to the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared millions of slaves free in 1863. King added, 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. At the end, prompted by Mahalia Jackson's cry, tell them about the dream, Martin, King departed from his prepared speech to give his famous I Have a Dream speech. I'll return to this speech in the next segment. Another little-known but also historic event took place right after King's speech when Belafonte returned to his hotel suite. It was the nationally televised Civil Rights Roundtable. Belafonte was joined in his suite by several film stars, including Marlon Brando, Sidney Poitier, and Paul Newman. After meeting President Kennedy and the First Lady at the White House, 10 senior civil rights leaders were transported in limousines to the WTTG offices in Washington, a media outlet of Metropolitan Broadcasting Television. The leaders were assembled there for a live, nationally televised roundtable discussion on the day's exhilarating events. And wouldn't you know it, of all people, the CIA mole in MLK's inner circle had been chosen to moderate this discussion. Belafonte later recalled his shock after turning on his TV that day. "Wait a minute," I said. I looked more closely at the moderator and nearly fell off my chair. "My God," I said, "it's my old financial advisor, that con man turned FBI informer." I had not seen him since I eluded our fraught relationship. Belafonte said, "He wasn't a TV moderator. So how could he be there on this TV program with the country's leading civil rights figures?" It blew my mind. The secret CIA pact with the FBI on MLK. A day or two later, Belafonte asked King what he knew about the roundtable's moderator. Dr. King said he had the impression that the mole was an advisor to one of the panel's other guests, James Farmer of CORE. King's answer, of course, was true, but Belafonte's autobiography, My Song, clearly shows that he continued to think that the mole was still reporting directly to the FBI. As Belafonte recalled, the mole had weaseled his way into Farmer's good graces and become a confidant. In his conversations with the FBI, as transcripts later showed, the mole would pitch Farmer as the smart and accommodating civil rights leader the government should work with, while characterizing Martin as dumb and at the same time an active agent of Beijing, whom the FBI should sideline at any cost. However, by this time, the mole had been working for the CIA for 5 years. According to a CIA agreement with J. Edgar Hoover, the director, the CIA passed whatever they learned from the mole on to the FBI. Belafonte told the truth to MLK, who told it to Leveson. In doing this, Belafonte finally, after 7 years, knowingly violated his legal agreement with the mole. Belafonte explained his reason for sharing his story with Dr. King. As far as I could see, though, the mole had changed the playing field by putting himself in close proximity to Martin and the other civil rights leaders. I had a higher obligation now, to make Martin aware of what a dangerous character the mole was. My story astonished King. Dr. King then shared this surprise with Stanley Leveson. Leveson decided to share his secrets with Belafonte. The chain reaction caused by Belafonte's cluing in of King about the mole ended in a far greater surprise for Belafonte the next time he met Leveson in New York. Leveson decided to share all his secrets. Belafonte recalled the moment. Leveson told me there was something I needed to know. Now, usually Stan seemed to be unflappable. Not now. "Okay," I said, "hit me." Leveson: "My ex-wife was your analyst." Belafonte: "I tried without success to get my mind around that." "I was married to Janet," Stan said. "Back in the 40s, we got divorced. She then married the mole." Stanley Leveson held up his hands and lamented. "I don't know what it means, but it happened." Belafonte remembers that at that moment, my mind was totally blown. Leveson realized that this was the moment to tell everything to Belafonte. Unraveling past secrets. So Levinson didn't stop there. He decided not to hold anything back from Belafonte anymore. Belafonte recalled what Levinson had added. Stan filled in what he could. Janet really was a psychotherapist. With Stan, she'd also participated in various leftist causes of the 40s. Somehow, Stan had met the mole and got into business with him. Stan hadn't known much about the mole, only that when Levinson's marriage broke up, Janet went off with him. Whether she'd known of the mole's communist background, Stan had no idea. Had the FBI forced her to be an informant too? Who knew? It was possible, we agreed, that Janet might have remained unaware of the mole's past name, and known him only as the mole, novelist, screenwriter, and financial advisor. But then, why had Janet, in my sessions with her, kept trying to worm out information about Paul Robeson, if not to pass it on to her husband? Treason over Kennedy's plan to withdraw U.S. advisors from South Vietnam. In September of 1963, President Kennedy decided to withdraw his American military advisors from South Vietnam. In early October, he secretly implemented the plan. President Kennedy's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Maxwell Taylor, gutted the president's plan behind the backs of Kennedy and his Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara. Meanwhile, Taylor, along with other officers, secretly adopted Op Plan 34A, a plan that would lead to full American military intervention in South Vietnam. From 1964 to 1968, President Johnson sent more than 500,000 U.S. combat troops to Vietnam. Most of them were African Americans. In sum, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. publicly condemned the American war in Vietnam. During the Johnson administration, Dr. King was criticized from all sides, and not only by white Americans. Many African American leaders argued that King's public support against the war would harm the civil rights movement. Dr. King answered this way: a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. In addition, Dr. King argued persuasively that the enormous cost of the Vietnam War hurt programs for poor people, both black and white. The mole was correct about one thing: MLK hated what America was doing in Vietnam.
I don't mind giving my witness this morning. I'm against war in general. And I'm really against the war in Vietnam in particular. I'm against it because of its injustice. And anybody who knows the history and the development of that war realize that it is one of the most tragic evils and injustices ever perpetrated on a nation, and we are destroying that country, going down this dark and tragic road. The most hated nation in the world, that a single official of our country can go anywhere in the world without being stoned and eggs being thrown at them, anywhere they go in the world. It's because we have taken on to ourselves a kind of arrogance of power. We've ignored the mandates of justice and morality. And I don't know about you, but I wish I could make a witness more positive about this thing. I wish I was of draft age. I wish I did not have my ministerial exemption. And I'll tell you this morning, I would not fight in the war in Vietnam. I'd go to jail before I do it. And I say to the federal government or anybody else, they can do to me what they did to Dr. Spock and William Sloan Coffin, my good friend, the chaplain of Yale. They just as well get ready to convict me, because I'm going to continue to say to young men, if you feel it in your heart that this war is wrong, unjust, and objectionable, don't go and fight in it. Follow the path of Jesus Christ.
I'm so convinced of the importance of this particular sermon that is the reason why this presentation began with it and ended with it. I'm ready to take any questions now.
The United States, as the world knows, will never start a war. We do not want a war. We do not now expect a war. This generation of Americans has already had enough, more than enough, of war and hate and oppression. We shall be prepared if others wish it. We shall be alert to try to stop it. But we shall also do our part to build a world of peace where the weak are safe and the strong are just. We are not helpless before that task or hopeless of its success. Confident and unafraid, we must labor on, not towards a strategy of annihilation, but towards a strategy of peace.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This afternoon, following a series of threats and defiant statements, the presence of Alabama National Guardsmen was required on the University of Alabama to carry out the final and unequivocal order of the United States District Court of the Northern District of Alabama. That order called for the admission of two clearly qualified young Alabama residents who happened to have been born Negro. That they were admitted peacefully on the campus is due in good measure to the conduct of the students of the University of Alabama, who met their responsibilities in a constructive way. I hope that every American, regardless of where he lives, will stop and examine his conscience about this and other related incidents. This nation was founded by men of many nations and backgrounds. It was founded on the principle that all men are created equal, and that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened. Today we are committed to a worldwide struggle to promote and protect the rights of all who wish to be free. And when Americans are sent to Vietnam or West Berlin, we do not ask for whites only. It ought to be possible, therefore, for American students of any color to attend any public institution they select without having to be backed up by troops. It ought to be possible for American consumers of any color to receive equal service in places of public accommodation, such as hotels and restaurants and theaters and retail stores, without being forced to resort to demonstrations in the street. And it ought to be possible for American citizens of any color to register and to vote in a free election without interference or fear of reprisal. It ought to be possible, in short, for every American to enjoy the privileges of being American without regard to his race or his color. In short, every American ought to have the right to be treated as he would wish to be treated, as one would wish his children to be treated. But this is not the case. The Negro baby born in America today, regardless of the section of the state in which he is born, has about 1/2 as much chance of completing a high school as a white baby, born in the same place on the same day. 1/3 as much chance of completing college. 1/3 as much chance of becoming a professional man. Twice as much chance of becoming unemployed. About 1/7 as much chance of earning $10,000 a year. a life expectancy which is 7 years shorter, and the prospects of earning only half as much. This is not a sectional issue. Difficulties over segregation and discrimination exist in every city, in every state of the Union, producing in many cities a rising tide of discontent that threatens the public safety. Nor is this a partisan issue. In a time of domestic crisis, men of goodwill and generosity should be able to unite regardless of party or politics. This is not even a legal or legislative issue alone. It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right. We are confronted primarily with a moral issue. It is as old as the Scriptures and is as clear as the American Constitution. The heart of the question is whether all Americans are to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities, whether we are going to treat our fellow Americans as we want to be treated. If an American, because his skin is dark, cannot eat lunch in a restaurant open to the public, if he cannot send his children to the best public school available, if he cannot vote for the public officials who represent him, if, in short, he cannot enjoy the full and free life which all of us want, then who among us would be content to have the color of his skin changed and stand in his place? Who among us would then be content with the counsels of patience and delay? 100 years of delay have passed since President Lincoln freed the slaves, yet their heirs, their grandsons, are not fully free. They are not yet freed from the bonds of injustice. They are not yet freed from social and economic oppression. And this nation, for all its hopes and all its boasts, will not be fully free until all its citizens are free.
It is at that time of those two speeches that President Kennedy told Secretary of Defense McNamara and a couple other people really close to him that we were going to pull our advisors out of Vietnam. So all these things were happening, literally, and then the I Have a Dream speech, all these things happened at once. And it seems to me like the president knew he might not be living very long, and so he wanted to show the courage of his convictions finally. That's what he did that summer. Let's go ahead and do the one more time.
Even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream.
Yeah.
It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day
Yeah.
this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
So I'm getting ready for the keynote speech, which we talked about it, David Denton and I did. I don't want to come down here and not make some kind of positive witness about Martin Luther King at this particular time, 55 years later. So it's going to be a Memphis eulogy for Martin Luther King. I want to say one thing before I do it, and the questions will be after this if you want, but I'm going to just, we had a lot of stuff on the MLK stuff, naturally, at this particular conference. One thing that was left out that I would like to put in is In the Clavern in Alabama that was talked about earlier today, there was an informant for the FBI. Now, he was a bad guy. He participated in all the bad things they did, beating people and so on. But he dutifully passed on what he learned, which was that on the Freedom Rides, one particular day, a deal was made between the governor of the state and the police protection was going to be removed for 20 minutes so that people could do what they want. And they said, you know, kill them, kick them, do whatever you want to do for 20 minutes. And so Gary Rowe was that informant, and he told the FBI local office, and the FBI local sent it straight to Director Hoover. Now, look, I teach in counterterrorism, and we used to just do, you know, Al-Qaeda stuff. In the last couple of classes, I've started to talk about Western terrorism. There's plenty of it all around the world. But there's also domestic terrorism. And what is the counter-terrorism to this terrorism that's been going on here against black people? And it is sit-ins and stuff like that, getting your head beat in and not fighting back. That's counterterrorism, American style. And it was, you have to understand that this makes J. Edgar Hoover and the governor of Alabama accessories before the fact and accessories after the fact. Am I right, the lawyers? Huh? Yes. And they should still be prosecuted, even if they're dead. So I just wanted to add that to this now. Very shortly after the time of that stem-winding sermon that you just listened to, King also made a pretty long speech at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in Atlanta, Georgia. It was August 1967, and I want to read just one paragraph from that to set up my eulogy. This is where King was 6 months before his murder. "Where do we go from here?" was his title. "Let this affirmation be our ringing cry. It will give us the courage to face the uncertainties of the future. It will give our tired feet new strength as we continue our forward stride towards the city of freedom. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds of despair, and when our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, let us remember that there is a creative force in this universe working to pull down the gigantic mountains of evil, a power that is able to make a way out of no way and transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows." "Oh, Martin, what will they say?" is the title of my eulogy. Oh, Martin, what will they say? If our world yet manages to survive, what will they say then? And what will they say about you? There are too many things we say about you today, multitudes of details that will turn to rust and will gather dust. But we wonder, what is it about you that will never unwind? What is the golden ball you've left behind that will ring down through the halls of time? I think I know it. Deep down inside, I've always known it. It is the most important gift that was ever bequeathed to this rare, precious orb of life that the universe has leased to us. Martin, it was you and brothers Jack and Bobby who, for all your differences and idiosyncrasies, were pulled together for that unanticipated and very auspicious moment when there came that black and white miracle at the ballot box. The election of 1960, right? Then there came the terrible times when the stars were falling down and to the ashes underground from a destiny betrayed. Yet when all seemed lost, just like Martin predicted, then came a flashing light and a clarion call from your shining golden ball of destiny reclaimed that saved the world, saved this world from an utter nuclear Armageddon. that was waiting in the winds to devour everything, large and small. Long after we are gone, they will speak of you, Martin, knowing that your sacrifice saved us all. Thank you very much. We'll take questions now. If you have any. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the mind control sessions you were discussing with Harry Belafonte, and if you can provide any more details about what you're calling mind control.
Well, you know, if he was put under, he would not remember it. So I'm not somebody who can hypnotize other people. But clearly, that's what they were manipulating him into giving up information. Now, I think it's a very important point that the guy that they assigned to him as his case officer was a mind control guy. Okay. It's a very important point to remember that in the CIA security office, the case officer that they assigned to this mole was, in fact, very high up in the mind control programs of the CIA. And he also worked with James McCord to go places to get, in New York, to get big boxes and boxes and boxes of what looks to me to be sessions of mind control stuff that were being brought back. Because a lot of that stuff was done in New York, by the way. A lot of these mind control experiments were done.
Was George Hunter White part of that cluster?
Say it a little louder.
George Hunter White, was he part of that cluster?
Yes, of course he is. There's a whole bunch of people that are in that. And we had a good, from Lisa Peace, we had a good piece where she talked about, she mentioned artichoke and bluebird and all these. There was many, everybody wanted to get in on it. It was the thing, this mind control stuff. But they would go over to Czechoslovakia, get real close to the Soviet Union if they could. And then what they would do, they would go across the border and they would snatch a KGB guy, they would bring him back, and they would do the whole mind control stuff and then bury him. So they would go over and snatch people overseas as well. And look, my book's going to come out sometime this year. And the documents are heavily redacted, the version that is left now in the 2017-2018 release. I've got 4 sets of those, and my interns helped me put them all together, and we found that we could take and put them together and find every single word of all of these documents. So we'll publish those things, and the book will be out, and then I'll be satisfied that nobody's going to try and stop me this time. Keep going through that. Is there any other question here? Yeah, go ahead.
John, if you were to mention the name of the mole, would we recognize the name?
No, you would not. It's a crazy name for him to take. He was, look, it's of Irish descent, and he's a Russian, Romanian background. He doesn't look anything like, you know, he's from Ireland. And he was a high school dropout. And so I have a copy of all of his questions and answers at that WTTG thing. And it's clear that it had to be corrected because all of his sentences were completely stupid, incorrect grammar and all that. And those black leaders that he was asking the questions to were a hell of a lot smarter than he was. But he really didn't like King, and that became evident in the way he handled Dr. King in that WTTG interview. So anyway, are there any other questions? Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. John Newman. I don't know, but I was sitting on the edge of my seat. Were you? Yeah. Listening to that presentation? That was amazing. Well, it's time to wrap up our conference. It's been an amazing experience, has it not? Having never been to Memphis and never having been to a MLK-centric conference before, I didn't really know what to expect, but I came away with a lot more than I would have expected, and I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to be a part of it. And I want us to thank Professor David Denton for all the hard work that he put into this. Dave and I had a lot of phone calls leading up to this, and he put his blood, sweat, tears, and money, backing this to make sure that this would happen. And I think it was way beyond, what I could have imagined. So I'm not sure if you have any plans for something like this in the future other than November.
Well, I'm going to talk about that.
But anyway, I think there's going to be a lot of interest should you decide to do that again. So ladies and gentlemen, if you would, one more time for David Denton. Yes, just a second, John.
I want to acknowledge Heather Fear. She did a lot of editing over many years, and I could never have done as much as I have without she's in our inner sanctum. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Heather.
It's been a long night. It's hard not to run a bit over, but I think everybody enjoyed it. We had a great group of speakers. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Appreciate all those guys. Just a couple quick things. He mentioned Dallas. Hey, we're doing Dallas in November, so be looking for it. We hope I'll be with JFK Historical Group, with some collaborations with other people, Project JFK. We're going to be there in November. We hope you join us. And like a shameless plug, but if you want to donate to JFK Historical Group, we have a donate button to help our cause. We appreciate several of the folks in the room have already done that. We appreciate the help. And again, we hope to see you all in Dallas. Let's go have a drink.
Hey, David, before we let him go, do we have something going on tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock?
No, unless people want to get together informally, we're not.
Okay.
We're not, but let's.
By the way, we got about 4 books uncovering the lost mold that can be signed if you're interested.
Okay, so the books, Dr. John Newman plus Chris Milligan still has to take a look back through all his stuff. But again, thank you very much, folks. Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are live here in Memphis, those of you who are here on Zoom, thank you for your attention. Thank you for your participation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And hopefully we'll see you again soon.